I also find fascinating that after all these years of strife and argument and dynamics between city and suburb, there's still a huge body of interest and sympathy or desire outside of the city to come back and try to fix it. And these are folks with means now that may have had an earlier childhood experience in the city that was very positive, and they still bring that with them in their kind of collective consciousness. And they could easily find business enterprise elsewhere, but they continue to express interest and hope that this great city, and it really can be a great city again in a different form, hopefully it can come back. Detroit was pivotal in the effort to win World War II. Detroit was the second biggest city or the third biggest city in the roaring 20s after New York and Chicago. And Detroit, probably any city in the entire country, gave more people a chance to establish a living with a house and a family and make a decent wage, in the factories. And I think, with all the recent developments of the big three and the negative response we've gotten from the greater country about our automobile manufacturers and the unions, I think the country has to be reminded that not to take that legacy for granted. It really gave a lot of people a chance to have a foothold and live, the American dream.
Creative downsizing is a way of putting a hopeful face on a problem that we have, and that is the loss of jobs. But the critical issue is that in the process of downsizing, we improve or don't lose the quality of life that we've established. And so instead of making things bigger and bigger, we should be concerned about making them better. Bigger isn't better. And we've discovered that through the expansion that we've gone through into the suburbs, where more and more and less quality houses are being built further and further away from the central core. The goal is to bring more and more higher quality businesses and houses back to the central core, so that our roads and our infrastructure are not spread out as far as it has to be, so that when we do go through these dynamic population movements, that we don't lose the quality of life that's already been established. I think in European culture, they've gone through this many thousands of years. We're a young country. We're several hundred years old. And so we haven't come to grips with this dynamic quality of population movement that we have here. And I think that it's really important that we keep our architecture and our urban structures as anchors to this very dynamic flow of population that we have in the country.
One of the interesting things from a generational perspective about creative downsizing is that I think over the past maybe 10, 15 years, we've seen extraordinary innovation in the technological realm. And I think what that's created is it's created an entire generation that expects a high level of interactivity. So, you see people walking around on their cell phones, you see them checking their iPhones, you see them constantly finding the next electronic thing to catch their attention. And I think one of the things that's emerged out of that is a need for spaces that don't take your attention. So for me, I find driving, an hour somewhere to be, I guess, almost a waste of time. And I guess I sort of feel like a lot of my friends, a lot of people that I interact with that are of my generation feel that way. And so for us, public transit is critical. A lot of my friends move to cities with solid public transit systems. And the main reason why is they can get stuff done, personal stuff, maybe work stuff, on their way to work versus sitting in a car listening to the radio. And so it's focusing on critical dynamics like that are starting to reshape our cities in ways that I think a lot of people don't really understand. That's what's driving things like people wanting to be closer to work, people wanting to live more densely, people wanting to be near grocery stores, near coffee shops. And the more we can come to understand that, and then also come to understand that the way that it was over 50 years ago or in the early 20th century, that fit the lifestyle that a lot of my generation is actually looking for nowadays. You know, if we can save the buildings in Detroit so that when they're ready for redevelopment, when it's time to go in and you know, expend the $50 million to renovate a building, that those buildings are still there. Because I mean, the reality is that if you're building in an urban setting, you inevitably need higher quality materials. People are going to run into your building. People are going to, you know, interact with your building more aggressively. It's important to have that infrastructure beforehand so that you don't have to spend all the money on new structure, on, you know, trying to build something that responds to the environment or to that particular place the way that the building that was there before did. So there's a lot of dynamics, and it's about plugging these pieces together and understanding the different political forces and the generational forces that are at play here.